Am I supposed to look at the camera or look at you?
Whatever you want. Whatever feels natural.
Okay. So my name is Ellen Bradley, and I'm a student here at Gonzaga. I'm a senior, double majoring in biology and environmental studies. And I'm active in the fight against climate change by participating in Fossil Free Gonzaga, which is a club on campus that's asking the Board of Trustees to divest the Gonzaga's endowment in fossil fuels. I'm also a part of Sustainable Eats, which was formerly known as Real Food Club. And we work with Sodexo to get more local, organic, ethically raised food into the COG and on campus in general. And we recently hit our 20% goal, which was awesome. And then I also work at the Office of Sustainability as a student sustainability engagement coordinator. So that's planning events that the office runs on campus related to sustainability. And then kind of just organizing with other student groups on campus to try to put a platform out there for sustainability. And then in my own personal life, I'm zero waste. I'm vegan. I ride my bike all the time in buses, especially when I'm at home. Seattle transportation is a lot better than Spokane. And I kind of take like climate change activism into every single element of my life. So anything you think of the classic things people tell you to do, that's just kind of my lifestyle. And the reason that I got so involved and care so much about climate change is because of my identity. I'm an Alaska Native and spent a lot of time in the summers growing up in Alaska and saw kind of what colonization has done to people, being from Seattle as well, seeing it in reservations, and then noticed how climate change has become this new form of colonization of all of the people who are privileged in this world and have created the system that now we have climate change are the ones that are going to escape climate change or are not going to see it as harsh as everyone else who has already experienced this colonization. So being Alaska Native, I've kind of always had it in my roots to value the environment and animals and plants more than almost anything else that other people value. And so that kind of drove me to climate change action, and then especially hearing how fish populations are decreasing in Alaska and knowing that fish is the most important part of my culture, salmon specifically, and climate change is a dead.
Almost.
And climate change is like really negatively affecting salmon populations. That's kind of like why I got involved, is to try to support my culture and our roots and heritage.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of the more intimidating things that I have ever done. And I remember right before we walked in, like I felt like how I used to feel before I would like go to a soccer match. Like I was like nervous and anxious, but also excited. And I had a realization after we left that they all individually have more money than probably all of us on Fossil Free will ever have together. And that was kind of scary and intimidating. And I'm glad I didn't think about that until after we left. Individually, they all don't have stakes in climate change because they're all white, rich men, but they're also old. And that's not to say like, oh, they're old, but like they don't have that kind of feature that we do, so it's not going to affect them in the same way it does us. So that was also intimidating, to try to advocate for our future and fight for our future that doesn't necessarily affect them. So I definitely see a lot of activism is coming from the youth, obviously, with the climate strike and how it's been developed. But I have noticed a lot of older generations being involved in it too. However, the majority of the people I see involved in climate change activism are white. It doesn't matter their age. Are white. It's been predominantly still people of privilege issue, because I can fight the fight because I'm privileged enough to go to university and don't have to worry about feeding myself or having enough jobs to pay for college or all of these things, that I have this time in my day to fight for climate change, which is why I chose to, because I come from a place of privilege, but I also come from a place of discrimination where I've experienced both in my life. But the movement overall is definitely run by mostly younger generations, but still white people, people of privilege, not necessarily your minority groups. And I don't think that's how it should be, because minority groups and people of lower socioeconomic status are the people that are most affected by climate change. But that also means that they don't have the time to fight for it because they're fighting for everything else that us privileged people just have. And that's the hard thing, is us white people, I claim to be not white, but I have that privilege of being white when it comes to so many things. like we have the time, but at the end we're not even going to be the ones that are most affected by it. So it's kind of, I think definitely for Foster Free Gonzaga, we utilize a lot of social media, and especially prior to the climate strike, they created a post and a poster that they were going to use as our symbol, and I know every single member in the group put it on their story, and I probably put things on my story for the entire week leading up to it. I have used a lot of social media as a way for advocacy. When I worked at the Office of Sustainability sophomore year, I was the communications manager, and so I was in charge of the Instagram, the Facebook, the Twitter, and then also writing the monthly newsletters that go out from the office. And so I definitely helped to make that a platform that more advocated for the events going on at campus to try to get more student involvement in things that the office were putting on or that other offices were putting on that were related to climate change or sustainability. And I've seen that it can be a useful tool, especially for people who are more our age and more versed in the social media realm. But it definitely can also be a hindrance, considering most of the people who we are advocating these changes towards are people that don't necessarily have social media or aren't as versed in it, like older generations who are more established in jobs or in the system that has set up climate change. They're not necessarily people that are using social media in the same way that we are. And so there is kind of a divide there, where it's a useful tool, but it also can be a hindrance.
And I do think that a lot can be done with the younger people in our generation, especially appealing to other generations and being able to understand those differences. Like I was saying, we've been struggling a lot with like the finance words, like the finance talk. Like some of us just don't understand that as well, but we're also...
I don't think there's enough coverage. And I do think a lot of the coverage usually ends up at like the people that are most big. So obviously like Greta got a ton of coverage, and that is amazing. But there were so many other leaders to the global climate strike, especially people in the United States, like people of color who started their own strikes within their own cities that didn't get any coverage, at least globally, maybe in their own local towns. So I definitely think there's not enough coverage. But I think for the most part, what I have seen is positive coverage, but that also comes from my perspective and kind of the different medias I follow would be the people who would give positive coverage. But I have heard of negative coverage, especially towards Greta, attacking her for being on the spectrum and having Asperger's, and focusing more on that instead of her activism. So for the most part, I guess the social media I've seen is positive, but I have also seen a lot of negative social media or other different types of media coverage of climate change and climate change activists, and discussions of how we're radical or other forms.
I think that recently, like with Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old climate activist, especially, she had her talk with the UN, I believe, recently. And I know that there was definitely some things that people had to say about that. I saw something last night about, because she has Asperger's, so she's slightly autistic, but she's a 16-year-old activist, and there's just media that are just slamming her for not being able to answer certain questions correctly sometimes without a script or this and that, and I just kind of find it ridiculous, especially the pressure that she's under and for being autistic. But I did see like some things that people were like, what the heck, like she can't even answer the question correctly, like without a script. But I think that specifically with her, like people are trying to target a person, a young person, instead of kind of addressing the real issue with that, which I think is an obvious issue, but I would say that's more of the negative attention I've been seeing lately.
Do you think
I can understand sometimes why older generations would think that, because I was having this discussion the other day in class, like thinking about my like little cousin's generation, which would be like 3 and 4 year olds right now, like thinking about them like growing up and being in the like the job world with us, like that's just so weird to think about. But I do think that younger people are often belittled and not like thought that they could know as much or have new ideas or be right about really anything just because of their age and their lack of experience in the world. But I don't really think the number of years you're on this earth can determine how much you know or how much experience you have in something. I definitely think it could be something, but I don't think that it should be a reason why people shouldn't back up like younger activists or just younger people in general on anything that they believe in.
Sweet.
At this point, it's not usually changing people's minds about climate change. It's convincing them to, now you need to act, now you need to change these things in your life now. People always talk about how, like, we're lucky that we're going to school and we're studying things, and once we get out of school, then we can create all these new industries that are going to be amazing, but we don't even really have time for that, especially for people that are in high school now. They don't really have the time to go through college, get an education, and then create the new renewable energy or create the battery that allows us to have solar panels everywhere, because we don't really have time. And so I think that's the issue, is people are not aware of how urgent they need to act. Mm-hmm. It's not that people aren't aware that it's happening, because most people know. But
Cool.
I think that there needs to be more media coverage.
More media
I
coverage.
do. And I think it needs to be across all different mediums and constantly in people's face. I think if you had newspapers, if you had Twitter, if you had Instagram, Facebook, if you had TV, whatever kind of medium you had telling you that climate change is happening, showing you it, because it's happening now. It's not some distant future. Like, there are things you could show now that are actually happening. If it was constantly in people's face, maybe they would act more. I guess that's what I would leave with. Cool. It shouldn't be that way. Like, we should just act, especially as college students who are educated.